If you could give up everything you've built to find real love, would you dare? Michael Parker stood alone in his corner office, 42 floors above the bustling streets of Boston, watching as the October sunset painted the city skyline in hues of amber and gold. The question echoed in his mind as he loosened his silk tie, a question that seemed absurd for a man who had everything, and yet nothing at all. The office phone rang again, his third call from the board in 2 days. Parker. He answered, his voice carrying the practiced authority of a man who had built a tech empire from nothing. Michael, it's Victoria. The board meeting just ended. The voice on the other end was crisp, professional, with an underlying current of steel. We need to discuss your personal situation before the IPO announcement. Michael closed his eyes, already knowing what was coming. My personal situation is just fine, Victoria. A single-father CEO doesn't project stability to our investors, especially with the holiday season approaching. Our competitors are families and Christmas cards. You're alone with twins and tabloids. The words stung more than he cared to admit. Michael glanced at the silver frame on his desk, two identical little girls with chestnut curls, and his late wife's eyes smiling on a summer day that felt lifetimes ago. The board expects progress on this matter by Thanksgiving, Victoria continued. The product launch needs the right image, the right family image. After hanging up, Michael pulled open his desk drawer and gently placed the photo of Jennifer inside. 3 years gone to cancer, and sometimes the pain felt as fresh as the day the doctors had given them the news. Back then, he'd been too busy building Parker Innovations to notice how quickly she was fading, too focused on changing the world to see his own world crumbling. Now raising 6-year-old twins Emma and Olivia alone, he felt her absence in every quiet morning, an empty dinner conversation. The empire he had built offered cold comfort in the silence of his Beacon Hill home. Michael reached deeper into his drawer, past contracts and financial reports, finding what he sought. A faded pair of jeans and a simple navy t-shirt. Relics from a different life for the IPOs and the Forbes covers before the loss. Tonight, he would try something he had never done before. He would bring his daughters on a blind date, and he would pretend to be someone else entirely. Daddy, why do we have to play pretend tonight? Emma asked, bouncing on her bed while Michael attempted to wrangle her wild curls into matching pigtails. Unlike her more reserved twin, Emma approached life with boundless energy and curiosity, a miniature hurricane in pink overalls. Because sometimes, Michael explained, struggling with the hair tie, grown-ups need to play games too. Tonight, we're going to pretend that Daddy isn't the boss of a big company. We're going to pretend that I'm just regular David Williams who fixes computers. Olivia looked up from her picture book, her eyes serious behind her small glasses. Is it because of Mommy? The sad ladies at school always talk to you different when they find out you're rich. Michael paused, the simple observation striking him with its perception. At 6, Olivia already saw the world with uncommon clarity, noticing things most adults missed. She was quieter than her sister, finding refuge in books and art, just as Jennifer had. That's very smart, Liv, he said softly. Yes, sometimes people act different when they know about my job or our house. But tonight is about meeting someone new and just being ourselves. Without the fancy stuff, Emma asked, finally sitting still. Without the fancy stuff, Michael confirmed, finishing her second pigtail with a triumphant smile. A gentle knock interrupted them. Eleanor, their 63-year-old housekeeper, appeared in the doorway. With her silver-streaked hair and kind Irish eyes, she had been with the family since before the twins were born, becoming more like a grandmother than an employee. The car you requested is waiting downstairs, Mr. Parker, she said, her lilting accent warming the formal words. Though I still don't understand why you've borrowed Mr. Sullivan's old Honda when you have 3 perfectly good cars in the garage. Michael smiled. Part of the game, Eleanor. Tonight we're just regular people going to a regular restaurant. Eleanor's eyes softened as she watched him help the girls into their jackets. Your Jennifer would be proud, you know. She always said you were at your best when you were just Michael, not Mr. Parker, the CEO. The words caught in his chest. Jennifer had said that, hadn't she? Back in '99, when they'd started the company from his parents' garage, when success was still a distant dream and love was all they had to sustain them. Will you be all right with the girls if this goes well? He asked. Eleanor smiled. I've managed these 2 since they were in diapers. Go find some happiness, Mr. Parker. It's been long enough. As they headed down in the private elevator, Emma tugging on his hand, Michael felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Nervous anticipation. The board's ultimatum had merely been the final push. The truth was he was tired of empty business dinners and charity galas where women saw his net worth before they saw him. Tonight would be different. Tonight he would be someone else. The story of Michael Parker was the quintessential American dream, one that had been chronicled in business magazines and Sunday features. In '99, fresh out of MIT with nothing but student debt and a revolutionary software idea, he had started coding in his parents' garage. Jennifer, his college sweetheart and then girlfriend, had believed in him enough to postpone medical school, working double shifts as a waitress to support them both. Their breakthrough came in 2008, just as the economy collapsed around them. Parker Innovation's security software became essential as businesses moved online, desperate to protect themselves in an increasingly digital world. By 2015, they were industry leaders. By 2020, Michael was being mentioned alongside tech titans. Then came the diagnosis. Jennifer, always too busy caring for others to notice her own symptoms, had stage 4 ovarian cancer. The prognosis was grim, 6 months, maybe a year, with aggressive treatment. Michael had thrown everything into saving her: the best doctors, experimental treatments, even flying specialists from across the globe. But money, influence, and determination couldn't change what was coming. Jennifer slipped away on a quiet spring morning while he was on a conference call he couldn't miss with two 4-year-old girls who didn't understand why mommy was sleeping so much. The guilt had nearly destroyed him. The man who could solve any business problem, who had built solutions that changed industries, couldn't save the one person who had believed in him before anyone else. After her death, Michael had retreated into his work, leaving the twins with nannies and Eleanor, while he built higher walls around his empire in his heart. It was only when Olivia had asked in her small, serious voice, "Does Daddy not love us anymore?" that he realized what he was losing. Since that day, he had restructured his entire life. Board meetings worked around school pickups. Conference calls waited until after bedtime stories. His executive assistant knew that twin ballet recitals outranked shareholder meetings. He was trying to be both father and mother to two little girls who still sometimes cried for the parent they'd lost. And in the process, he'd forgotten how to be anything else, especially how to be a man who might someday love again. Until today. You brought your children to a blind date. The hostess at Bella Noti, an intimate Italian restaurant in Boston's North End, raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow as Michael adjusted Emma's jacket. The restaurant was warm and inviting, with checkered tablecloths and candles and wine bottles, a far cry from the Michelin-starred establishments where Parker Innovations closed its biggest deals. "They're part of the package," Michael replied, simply helping Olivia with her small backpack filled with books. "The reservation should be under Williams, table for 3. The hostess consulted her tablet, her expression skeptical. "You're in luck. Only one reservation with children tonight. Table 9 by the window." As they weaved through the Friday evening crowd, Michael felt conspicuously underdressed in his faded jeans and plain t-shirt. For a man accustomed to bespoke suits and Italian leather shoes, the sensation was both uncomfortable and oddly freeing. "Is this where Mommy used to work?" Olivia whispered as they settled into their seats. The question caught him off guard. Jennifer had indeed worked at an Italian restaurant through college, though not this one. "No, sweetheart, but it does remind me of that time." He smiled, helping the girls into booster seats. "She used to bring home tiramisu when she worked late. Remember I told you about that?" Emma immediately grabbed a breadstick. "Was Mommy pretty when she was a waitress?" Michael felt the familiar ache in his chest, now tinged with warmth at the memory. The most beautiful waitress in Boston. She could carry 5 plates at once without dropping a single spaghetti noodle. A busboy brought coloring sheets and crayons for the girls, and Michael checked his watch. His date was already 10 minutes late. He'd found her on Second Chance, an app specifically for single parents that Robert, his 65-year-old friend and advisor, had insisted he try. Her profile had been refreshingly straightforward. Jenna, 37, marketing executive, mother of 1. They'd chatted briefly, and she'd seemed intelligent and direct, qualities he appreciated. His phone buzzed with a text message. "Sorry, can't make it. Just saw your profile pic with kids. Not ready for dating a dad of 2. Good luck." Michael stared at the screen, a disappointment mingling with a strange sense of relief. Perhaps this had been a foolish idea after all. He was about to gather the girls and leave when the front door opened. She entered alone, a slender woman with honey blonde hair falling in loose waves past her shoulders. She wore a simple emerald sweater that matched her eyes-worn jeans and practical boots. What caught his attention, however, was the canvas tote bag slung over her shoulder, overflowing with books, and the dog-eared paperback she held in one hand. The woman scanned the restaurant, checking her phone briefly before her gaze settled on their table. With a hesitant smile, she walked directly toward them. "Hi, I'm Abby," she said, brushing her hair behind one ear, in a gesture that seemed automatic rather than calculated. "Sorry I'm late, the bus was running behind schedule." Michael blinked in confusion. This wasn't Jenna from the app. Before he could correct her misunderstanding, Abby continued, settling into the empty chair. "I know not exactly a grand entrance," she said with a self-deprecating smile. "But you said window table with kids, so I figured this must be it." He opened his mouth to clarify the mistake, but stopped as he truly looked at her. There was something quietly sincere in her green eyes, a gentle awkwardness in her smile that felt genuine in a way he rarely encountered. Behind her obvious nervousness, he sensed a weariness he recognized all too well, the weight of carrying too many responsibilities alone. "No problem," he said softly, making a split-second decision. "We just got here ourselves." Abby turned her attention to the twins who were studying her with undisguised curiosity. "I didn't realize I'd be dining with such esteemed company tonight." Emma squinted at her. "Do you like cats?" The unexpected question made Abby laugh, a warm sound that seemed to brighten the entire table. "More than I like most people, if I'm being honest." Olivia, typically shy with strangers, silently slid a purple crayon across the table toward Abby. "Draw one," she requested quietly. Without hesitation, Abby picked up a napkin and began sketching. Within minutes, both girls were giggling, pointing at her admittedly lopsided kitten, drawing with delight. Michael sat back watching in astonishment. The usual awkwardness of introducing someone new to his daughters had evaporated. There was nothing forced about this interaction. It was effortless, natural, as though they'd known each other for years rather than minutes. He had no idea who this woman was or why she'd mistaken their table for her date, but something in him didn't want to break the spell just yet. The evening unfolded in cheerful chaos. Spaghetti sauce splattered onto the table, milk spilled, and was quickly mopped up with napkins and breadsticks, became temporary magic wands before being devoured. Through it all, Abby didn't flinch or glance longingly at the child-free couples enjoying romantic dinners nearby. Instead, she helped Emma wipe sauce from her chin and shared a story about how she once slipped and fell face first into a birthday cake at the library where she worked. The girls erupted in delighted laughter, and Michael felt something stir deep in his chest, a warmth he'd almost forgotten. "So you work at a library?" he asked, genuinely interested. Abby nodded. "Boston Public Library Children's Section. 7 years now." "Miss Abby, do you read stories to kids?" Emma asked, twirling spaghetti around her fork with limited success. "Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon," Abby confirmed. "It's my favorite part of the job." "Daddy reads to us every night," Olivia offered quietly, "even when he's very tired from making computers." Michael felt a flush of guilt at the cover story, but Abby merely smiled. "That makes him a very good dad, then." What struck him most was that Abby didn't ask about his job beyond his initial explanation of being an IT technician. She didn't mention career ambitions or ask about his house or car. Instead, she asked Olivia about her favorite animals and listened intently to Emma's elaborate story about a magic rock she'd found at school. And when she caught him watching her, she smiled not coyly or flirtatiously, but with genuine warmth that reached her eyes. It had been years since anything in his life had felt this natural, this uncomplicated. The irony wasn't lost on him that it was happening under completely false pretenses. A server approached their table, placing a leather-bound check folder discreetly at the edge. "Take your time," he said politely. "Dessert menu's coming right up." Michael stared at the check, suddenly realizing his predicament. This wasn't his usual suit with his usual wallet. These were borrowed jeans with empty pockets. He'd left his wallet in the car, assuming he'd retrieve it before entering. For a man worth billions, he couldn't even pay for spaghetti. Panic flared in his chest as he patted his empty pockets. Abby noticed his distress but didn't draw attention to it. She simply reached into her worn leather purse, extracted a bank card, and handed it to the server with a gentle smile. "It's fine," she said softly, tucking her hair behind her ear again. "My treat." "You didn't have to do that," Michael protested, feeling heat rise to his face. When was the last time someone else had paid for his meal? "I know," she interrupted gently, "but I wanted to. You looked like you needed someone to just be kind tonight." The restaurant noise seemed to fade around him as her words sank in. It wasn't about the money he could buy the entire restaurant and the block it stood on without blinking, But in that moment, it was about the way she saw him. Not as Michael Parker of magazine covers and shareholder meetings, but as a single father doing his best with spaghetti-stained shirts and mismatched hair ties. A man who was trying. A man who might need kindness. He looked at her, really looked. She had soft lines of weariness around her eyes, probably from late nights with books rather than parties. Her sweater was simple, her nails unpainted. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was just present, authentic kind. "Thank you," he said simply, the words carrying more weight than she could possibly understand. As the restaurant began to thin out, their table remained warm with conversation and crayons. Abby reached for the last breadstick, breaking it in half to share with Olivia, while continuing a story about her childhood. "I grew up in a little town in Maine in a house where money was always tight," she said, her eyes distant with memory. "But we had books stacked in every corner, on every shelf, even on the floor. My mom was a single parent, a school teacher. When the power would go out during winter storms, she'd read to me by candlelight." She smiled at the memory. "That's why I became a librarian. Books made me feel rich, even when we had nothing else." Michael listened intently, struck by the absence of bitterness in her voice. There was no envy, no longing for what she had missed, just quiet gratitude for what she had been given. It contrasted sharply with his usual social circles, where people with everything still seemed desperate for more. "You must love your job," he said. Abby nodded, her face lighting up. "I do. There's this magic moment when a child who's been struggling to read suddenly connects with a story, or when the kids who come in after school light up because I remembered their names or set aside a book specifically for them." She shrugged. "It's small, I suppose, but it matters. At least I like to think it does." Emma, growing sleepy, leaned against Abby's arm. Without thinking, Abby gently brushed a crumb from the child's cheek, a maternal gesture so natural it made Michael's heart ache. "These girls," she whispered, "are something special." Michael swallowed hard. "They're my whole world." When the meal ended, they lingered outside the restaurant. The autumn night was cool, but pleasant stars visible despite the city lights. Michael offered to walk Abby to the bus stop or give her a ride home. "It's not a fancy car," he said with a wry smile, gesturing toward the borrowed Honda, "but it gets from point A to point B." Abby hesitated, glancing down the street toward the bus stop. "It's okay," she said softly. "I like the walk. Helps clear my head." He tried not to look disappointed. "Of course." She crouched down to the girl's level, giving each a warm smile. "It was lovely meeting you both." "Come read us stories sometime," Emma requested boldly, while Olivia nodded in silent agreement. Abby's smile lingered. "Maybe I will." She gave a small wave and turned, walking away into the night, her book tucked under her arm and her tote bag swinging slightly with each step. Michael watched until she disappeared around the corner, feeling an unexpected sense of loss. The drive home was quiet, the twins already dozing in their car seats, hands still smudged with crayon. A single piece of napkin art fluttered from the dashboard, a sketched cat with too many whiskers and the words, "Abby plus Emma plus Olivia," in crooked letters. Michael stared at it as he parked in the garage of his Beacon Hill home, heart constricting with an emotion he couldn't quite name. He'd built a tech empire, but he had no idea how to find one children's librarian in a city of nearly 700,000 people. And he had no idea why it suddenly seemed so important that he did. Victoria Hartman reviewed the quarterly projections with a critical eye, her reading glasses perched on the edge of her nose. At 55, she had navigated the corporate world longer than most of her male colleagues, fighting twice as hard for half the recognition. Her corner office at Parker Innovations reflected her methodical nature, everything in its place, nothing extraneous, power evident in every careful detail. "These numbers for Q4 look optimistic, Robert," she said, addressing the older man seated across from her desk, "especially given Michael's distraction." Robert Wilson leaned back in his chair, his weathered face impassive. At 65, the former veteran had seen enough of life to recognize ambition masked as concern. He'd been with Michael since the garage days, serving first as investor, then advisor, and finally as the closest thing to a father figure the younger man had since losing his parents in the same year he lost his wife. "Michael has never missed a target," Robert replied calmly. "Not even the quarter Jennifer died." Victoria removed her glasses. "The board isn't questioning his intelligence, Robert. They're questioning his stability. A CEO with young children and no partner presents certain optics challenges, particularly with the holiday season approaching and the new product launch scheduled for Thanksgiving." So Michael's crime is being a widower who prioritizes his children. His crime, as you put it, is failing to present the stable family image our investors expect. Victoria's voice remained professional, though her eyes narrowed slightly. Parker Innovations is positioning for an IPO that could make history. We cannot afford any vulnerabilities. Robert studied her for a moment. What exactly are you proposing, Victoria? The board has given him until the Thanksgiving product announcement to address his personal situation. Find a suitable partner, present a unified front, or consider stepping back to a less visible role. Her smile was thin. For the good of the company, of course. The company he built from nothing, Robert reminded her, which is now bigger than any one person, she countered, even its founder. Robert stood straightening his jacket. I'll convey the message, though I believe Michael already understands the ultimatum. It's not an ultimatum, Robert, it's business. As he left Victoria's office, Robert's thoughts turned to the young man he'd watched grow from a brilliant but naive programmer to an industry titan. He had witnessed Michael's greatest triumphs and deepest losses, had seen how Jennifer's death had nearly broken him, and how his daughters had ultimately saved him. Now the board, led by Victoria's calculating influence, was threatening everything Michael had sacrificed so much to build, using his devotion to his children as leverage against him. The irony was brutal. Robert pulled out his phone, typing a brief message to Michael. Board meeting aftermath. We need to talk. Soon. He pocketed his phone, gazing out over the Boston skyline from the 40th floor. He'd learned that sometimes the most dangerous enemy wasn't the one firing at you from across the field, but the one walking beside you, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Michael needed to shore up his defenses, and quickly. But perhaps what he needed even more was something worth fighting for beyond the company that was slowly becoming his gilded cage. The email from the board arrived at 11:47 p.m., while Michael sat in his home office reviewing code for their newest security protocol. Eleanor had long since gone to her apartment in the guest wing, and the twins had been asleep for hours. The house was silent, save for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, a wedding present from Jennifer's parents. The subject line was simple: board resolution regarding CEO public image. Michael opened it with a sense of resignation, already knowing its contents. The language was corporate and sterile, but the message was clear. Present a more traditional family image before the Thanksgiving product launch and press conference, or prepare to step back into a strategic advisory role. He closed his laptop, moving to stand by the window overlooking the city lights. The ultimatum wasn't a surprise after his conversation with Victoria and Robert's cryptic text. What surprised him was how little he cared about the threat of losing his position. 10 years ago, or even 5, the prospect would have been unthinkable. Parker Innovations was his legacy, his creation, the culmination of countless sleepless nights and sacrifice moments. He had missed anniversaries, birthdays, even the early signs of Jennifer's illness for the sake of the company. But standing in his silent home with his daughters sleeping down the hall and the memory of a simple Italian dinner still fresh in his mind, the company suddenly felt like what it truly was: just a company. Not a family, not a life, and certainly not worth sacrificing his second chance at either. Michael's phone buzzed with a notification from his calendar app. Tomorrow was Tuesday Children's Story Hour at the Boston Public Library, 3:30 p.m. He smiled, making a mental note to leave the office early. Perhaps it was time to introduce his daughters to the joy of library story time. And perhaps, if he was very lucky, the librarian with the kind eyes and lopsided cat drawings might remember them. The Boston Public Library stood majestic against the autumn sky, its weathered stone facade speaking of a century's worth of stories held within. Michael Parker sat in his parked car across the street, watching families stream into the grand entrance, his hands unexpectedly tense on the steering wheel. For a man who regularly addressed boardrooms and negotiated multi-million-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, the prospect of walking into a children's reading hour suddenly felt daunting. "Daddy, are we going in or just looking at the building?" Olivia asked from the back seat, her voice patient but curious. She had been especially excited when he'd suggested the library visit, changing from her school clothes into her favorite blue dress without being asked. "Yeah, Daddy," Emma chimed in, already unbuckling her seatbelt. "You said the book lady might be here." Michael smiled at his daughters in the rearview mirror. "The book lady's name is Abby, remember? And yes, we're going in." He had swapped his CEO persona for the David Williams disguise again: faded jeans, a simple button-down shirt, and the absence of the expensive watch that usually adorned his wrist. The borrowed Honda completed the illusion of normalcy parked among dozens of similar unremarkable vehicles. Inside, the library's vaulted ceilings and ornate detailing spoke of a bygone era when buildings were constructed not just for function, but as monuments to human knowledge. The twins gazed upward in awe, their small hands gripping his as they absorbed the grandeur around them. The children's section is this way, Michael said, following the cheerful signs adorned with cartoon characters. As they rounded the corner into a brightly colored area filled with child-sized furniture and books arranged on low shelves, Michael spotted her immediately. Abby sat cross-legged on a round carpet surrounded by about 15 children, an open picture book in her lap. Her honey blonde hair was gathered in a loose ponytail, and she wore a cardigan over a simple floral dress, looking every bit the quintessential librarian except for the animated expressions that transformed her face as she read, becoming each character in turn. In a house in the deep dark woods, she read, her voice shifting to a mysterious whisper that had every child leaning forward, lived a rabbit who was not afraid of anything. Or so she thought. Emma tugged at Michael's hand, whispering loudly, "It's her. It's the cat drawing lady." Several parents turned to look, and Michael felt a flush of embarrassment, but Abby simply glanced up, her eyes widening slightly in recognition. She offered a small, surprised smile before returning to her story without missing a beat. They found seats at the back of the group, the twins immediately enthralled by Abby's storytelling. Michael found himself equally captivated, though not by the tale of the brave rabbit. Instead, he watched Abby, the way her eyes lit up during exciting passages, how she paused dramatically at just the right moments, the gentle attention she gave to a shy toddler who crept closer to see the pictures. This was someone who truly loved what she did, who found joy in sharing stories with children who hung on her every word. In his world of quarterly projections and shareholder value, such simple, genuine passion was refreshingly rare. When the story concluded and the children dispersed to various activities, Abby approached them, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear in that now familiar gesture. "Well, this is a surprise," she said warmly. "I didn't expect to see you three so soon. We wanted to hear your stories," Emma announced while Olivia nodded in solemn agreement. "Daddy said you're the best storyteller in Boston," Emma added, causing Michael to cough awkwardly. "I may have mentioned you work in the children's section," he clarified, giving Abby an apologetic smile. Abby laughed, the sound as warm and genuine as he remembered. "Well, I'm flattered either way." She crouched down to the girl's level. "Did you enjoy the story about the brave rabbit?" "The voices were the best part," Emma declared, "especially the scary fox voice. I liked how the rabbit was scared but did the hard thing anyway," Olivia offered, quietly adjusting her small glasses. Abby looked impressed. "That's very perceptive, Olivia. Being brave isn't about not feeling fear. It's about doing what's right even when you're afraid." Something in her words struck Michael, deeply resonating with his own situation in ways she couldn't possibly understand. "We have about 30 minutes before I need to help with the after-school program," Abby said, standing. "Would you like me to show you around? The children's section has some amazing secrets most people don't know about." The twins' enthusiastic agreement settled the matter. As Abby led them through the labyrinth of bookshelves, pointing out hidden reading nooks and special collections, Michael observed the easy way she interacted with his daughters. There was nothing forced or artificial in her kindness, a rarity in his experience, where people often viewed his children as either an inconvenience or a path to his favor. "And this," Abby said, stopping before an antique wooden cabinet with dozens of tiny drawers, "is my favorite thing in the whole library." She pulled open one of the small drawers, revealing hundreds of yellowed catalog cards. "Before computers, this is how we found books. Each card is like a little treasure map leading to a story." Olivia ran her fingers gently over the typewritten words. "It's like history you can touch." "Exactly," Abby beamed. "I always tell the children that these cards were touched by readers from 50 years ago, 70 years ago, even 100 years ago, all looking for their next adventure." "Did you use these when you were little?" Emma asked. Abby laughed. "I'm not quite that old, but yes, when I was a girl, we still used card catalogs in our small-town library. My mom taught me how to use them when I was about your age." "Your mom read to you when the lights went out." Olivia remembered, surprising both adults with her recall. Abby's expression softened. "She did, by candlelight, some of my favorite memories." "Our mommy used to read to us too," Emma said, "but she had to go to heaven." The innocent statement hung in the air, bringing with it the familiar weight of grief. Michael opened his mouth to change the subject, but Abby was already responding, her tone gentle, but not pitying. She sounds like she was a wonderful mother, she said simply. I bet she picked out the very best books for you. She did all the voices too, Olivia said. Like you do. Abby smiled. Then I'm in excellent company. Michael felt a surge of gratitude for her response, acknowledging Jennifer's absence, without awkwardness or the uncomfortable sympathy he'd grown accustomed to. Just a simple recognition of what had been lost and what remained in memory. The moment was interrupted by a library assistant calling Abby's name, informing her that the after-school group had arrived early. I have to go, she said apologetically, but please feel free to stay and explore. Actually, Michael said, surprising himself with his boldness, we were wondering if you might be free for dinner again sometime. Abby looked momentarily taken aback, and Michael immediately regretted the forwardness of his request. They'd met exactly once under false pretenses, no less. But then she smiled, her green eyes crinkling at the corners. I'd like that. As they exchanged phone numbers, Michael carefully entering his personal line rather than his business contact. Emma tugged at Abby's skirt. Next time, can you show us where they keep the cat books? Absolutely, Abby promised. I'll even show you my special collection of cat stories that meow when you open them. Emma's eyes widened. They really meow? Well, you'll have to come back and find out, won't you? Abby winked before hurrying off to meet her next group of young readers. As Michael led the twins back through the library's grand halls, Olivia looked up at him with serious eyes. Daddy, I like Abby. She doesn't talk to us like we're babies. And she draws good cats, Emma added decisively, as if this settled the matter entirely. Michael smiled, feeling a lightness he hadn't experienced in years. I like her too. Over the following weeks, a pattern emerged that felt increasingly like the foundation of something Michael had stopped believing was possible, a second chance at happiness. Their outings were simple picnics in the Boston Common, where Abby brought books to read under the shelter of autumn-crowned trees. Saturday mornings at the Children's Museum, where she knew every exhibit by name. Quiet dinners after the twins were tucked in at home with Eleanor, where conversation flowed as easily as the modest wine they shared. Through it all, Michael maintained his disguise as David Williams' IT technician, an ordinary single father. The deception weighed on him increasingly with each meeting, but the fear of losing what they were building kept the truth locked behind his lips. He learned that Abby had grown up in rural Maine, raised by a schoolteacher mother who instilled in her a love of literature and learning. Her father had abandoned them when Abby was just 4, leaving behind nothing but a shelf of untouched books and unpaid bills. She had worked her way through college on scholarships and part-time jobs, finding her calling in library science and childhood education. In turn, he shared edited versions of his own history, the truth of Jennifer's death, and his struggle to raise the twins alone, but carefully omitting the details of his actual career and success. It must be difficult, Abby said one evening, as they walked along the Charles River, the city lights reflecting on the dark water, balancing work and being there for them. It is, he admitted, this part requiring no deception. There are days I feel like I'm failing at both. But you show up, Abby said simply. That's what matters most. You keep showing up. Her words stayed with him, echoing in his mind during board meetings and product reviews. While his colleagues discussed market share and profit margins, Michael found himself thinking of Abby's dream, a mobile reading program that would bring books to children in underserved communities and shelters. Books saved me as a child, she had explained, eyes bright with passion. They showed me worlds beyond our small-town possibilities, beyond what seemed available. Every child deserves that escape hatch, that window to something more. The sincerity of her vision moved him in ways that corporate ambitions no longer could. Here was someone who measured success not in dollars or influence, but in children's smiles and open minds. Meanwhile, at home, the twins blossomed in Abby's gentle presence. Olivia, always shy and reserved, began creating her own illustrated stories, proudly presenting them during their visits. Emma, perpetually in motion, would actually sit still for Abby's stories, asking thoughtful questions that revealed an emerging love of language. For the first time since Jennifer's death, their home felt filled with possibility rather than absence. But as Michael's personal life brightened, storm clouds gathered at Parker Innovations. Victoria Hartman had intensified her campaign against him, questioning decisions that would have gone unchallenged months before subtly undermining his authority in board meetings. The Thanksgiving product launch is 6 weeks away, she reminded him during one particularly tense executive meeting, and the board's expectations regarding your personal situation remain unchanged. Robert had pulled him aside afterward, concern evident in his weathered face. She's making moves, Michael. cultivating allies on the board, positioning herself as the stable alternative. Let her try, Michael had responded, surprising himself with his indifference. This company is your legacy, Robert pressed. Everything you and Jennifer built. The mention of Jennifer gave Michael pause. Would she recognize the company their shared dream had become? Would she approve of the corporate machine that had consumed so much of their life together, time they could never reclaim? Maybe some legacies aren't worth the cost, he had said quietly, leaving his old friend staring after him in confusion. You're distracted tonight, Maya Chen observed, setting a plate of dumplings between them in the small kitchen above her restaurant. At 40, Maya carried herself with the confident efficiency of a woman who had built a business from nothing. Her short black hair streaked with a defiant purple streak that matched her bold personality. Sorry, Abby sighed, picking up her chopsticks. Just thinking about work. Maya hummed skeptically. The library suddenly got interesting enough to put that dreamy look in your eyes. Try again, librarian. Abby laughed, having long ago accepted that little escaped her friend's notice. Fine, I've been seeing someone. Maya's eyebrows shot up. The dating app actually worked. I set up that profile months ago. Not exactly, Abby admitted, explaining the mistaken meeting at the restaurant and the connection that had followed. So you've been dating a single dad with adorable twins for almost a month, Maya summarized, refilling their teacups. And the problem is, there's something off. Nothing bad, Abby hurried to add. David is kind, attentive, wonderful with his daughters, but sometimes I catch this look in his eyes like he's holding something back. Maya considered this. Maybe he's just careful. After losing his wife, opening up can't be easy. It's not that, Abby frowned, trying to articulate her unease. Last week his phone rang during our picnic. He answered it, stepped away, but I overheard him discussing something about quarterly projections in a Series C funding round. That's not typical IT technician talk. So he's ambitious, or moonlighting, or investing his savings. Maya shrugged. Not everyone shares their whole life story right away, Abby, especially men. I know, and normally I'd agree with you. It's just... Abby trailed off, remembering the way David had seamlessly shifted from the authoritative tone on the phone call to his usual gentle manner when he returned. It had been like watching someone step between two different worlds. I've spent my life around books, Maya. I know when a story doesn't quite add up. Maybe he's married, Maya suggested bluntly. No, Abby said with certainty. The girls talk freely about their mother's death. There's genuine grief there, not deception. Then maybe he's just a guy who likes you and is afraid of scaring you off with whatever baggage he's carrying. Maya reached across the table, squeezing Abby's hand. Not everyone has your pathological honesty, you know. Pathological honesty, Abby repeated with a small laugh. That's a nice way of saying I have no filter. It's one of your best qualities, Maya assured her. That and your terrible taste in movies. As their conversation shifted to lighter topics, Abby tried to dismiss her concerns. Perhaps Maya was right. Everyone had parts of themselves they kept private, especially early in a relationship. And whatever David might be hiding, it couldn't be worse than some of the first dates she'd endured over the years. Still, a small voice persisted, whispering that there was more to David Williams than met the eye. The question was whether that something more would bring them closer together or drive them apart. The emergency call from Oakwood Academy came on a Wednesday afternoon while Michael was trapped in the most important board meeting of the quarter. Victoria was presenting her case for a corporate restructuring that would effectively diminish his authority, while elevating her own, and several key board members appeared to be receptive to her arguments. His personal phone vibrated persistently in his pocket, but the stakes were too high to step out. Only when it immediately began ringing again did he excuse himself, slipping into the hallway to answer. Mr. Parker, began the unfamiliar voice. This is Nurse Brenda from Oakwood Academy. I'm calling about Emma. She fell from the climbing structure during recess and may have sprained her wrist. We've been trying to reach you for the past 20 minutes. Michael's heart clenched. I'm sorry, I was in a meeting. Is she all right? She's being very brave, the nurse assured him. But she should be seen by a doctor to rule out a fracture. We also called the secondary emergency contact you listed, but we've been unable to reach a David Williams at that number. Michael froze. He had added Abby to the girl's emergency contacts as David Williams's friend, providing her number without considering the complications this might create. I understand, I'll be there as soon as possible, he said, already moving toward the elevator. Actually, Mr. Parker, we were able to reach Ms. Morgan from the library. She's already here with Emma. Michael stopped mid-stride. Abby is there. Yes, she arrived about 15 minutes ago. She mentioned she's a friend of the family. The nurse paused, though she seemed a bit confused when we couldn't locate any record of a David Williams associated with your daughter's enrollment. The carefully constructed parallel lives Michael had been maintaining were about to collide in the worst possible way. Please tell Emma I'm on my way, and he hesitated. Please tell Miss Morgan I'll explain everything. The board meeting Victoria's power play, the future of Parker Innovations all receded in importance as Michael rushed to his car. His only thought was reaching his daughter and facing the consequences of his deception. Abby sat in the nurse's office beside Emma, who was holding an ice pack to her wrist, with remarkable stoicism for a 6-year-old. When the school had called, Abby had been in the middle of cataloging new arrivals at the library. She dropped everything immediately, telling her supervisor it was a family emergency before realizing with some surprise that was exactly how it felt. Does it hurt very much? She asked, gently smoothing Emma's tousled hair away from her forehead. Only when I try to move it, Emma replied. Nurse Brenda says I was super brave. You absolutely are, Abby agreed, braver than most adults I know. Daddy's coming, Emma said with complete confidence. He always comes when we need him, even if he's doing important stuff. I'm sure he does, Abby said, though her mind was whirling with questions. The school had been unable to find any record of David Williams calling him Mr. Parker instead. They'd mentioned a corporate board meeting when explaining why he hadn't answered right away. None of it aligned with the IT technician's story she'd been told. The door opened and a man rushed in, the man she knew as David, looking harried and concerned. He wore an impeccably tailored suit instead of his usual casual attire, and an expensive watch glinted on his wrist. Emma, he breathed, crouching beside his daughter. I'm okay, Daddy, Emma assured him. I was trying to be Spider-Man, but the web shooters didn't work. He managed a smile, carefully examining her wrist. Maybe we should leave the web slinging to the professionals for now. Then he looked up, meeting Abby's gaze, and the moment she'd been dreading arrived. There was no more pretending, no more separate worlds. Just the truth hanging between them. Mr. Parker, Nurse Brenda said, entering with a clipboard. I've called ahead to Boston Children's. They can see Emma right away to rule out a fracture. Thank you, he said, standing. Your wife can bring the car around if you'd like to carry Emma, the nurse suggested, glancing at Abby. Oh, I'm not, Abby began automatically. She's a friend, Michael clarified, his eyes never leaving Abby's face, searching for a reaction. A very good friend who dropped everything to be here when Emma needed her. The simple truth of this statement hung in the air between them. I should go, Abby said quietly, gathering her bag. Emma needs to see a doctor, and you two have things to discuss. Abby, please, Michael said, his voice low and urgent. Let me explain. You're not really an IT guy, are you? Abby asked, though she already knew the answer. Emma looked between them, confusion clouding her features. Daddy, is Abby mad at us? No, sweetheart, Abby assured her quickly. I could never be mad at you. I just need to get back to work now that your dad is here. She leaned down, kissing Emma's forehead. Feel better, Spider-Girl. As she turned to leave, Michael gently caught her wrist. Will you let me call you later? Please. The hurt and confusion swirling inside her warred with the genuine concern in his eyes. Whatever lie he'd been living, his love for his daughter was undeniably real. Okay, she conceded. Later. It wasn't until she was halfway back to the library, sitting on a bus filled with strangers, that the full magnitude of the situation hit her. She had no idea who David or Michael really was, but the expensive suit, the corporate meeting, the obvious respect from the school staff all pointed to someone far different from the humble IT worker she'd been getting to know. The question was whether the man himself, the one who listened so attentively to his daughters, who remembered how she took her coffee, who looked at her like she was something precious, had been equally fabricated. The emergency room doctor confirmed what Michael had suspected, a mild sprain, not a fracture. Emma sat proudly as her wrist was wrapped, clearly enjoying being the center of attention. No climbing for 2 weeks, the doctor instructed with good-natured sternness. Doctor's orders. What about swinging? Emma negotiated, causing both adults to chuckle. Nice try. No swinging either, Michael said, helping her down from the examination table. Let's get you home to Olivia and Eleanor. They're very worried about you. As they waited for the discharge papers, Emma looked up at him with serious eyes. Daddy, why did Abby call you Michael? And why did she look sad? The innocent question cut straight to the heart of his deception. Michael sighed, crouching to his daughter's level. Remember our pretend game when we went to the restaurant that first night? Emma nodded. Well, I kept playing that game with Abby. I told her my name was David, not Michael. Why? Emma's brow furrowed in genuine confusion. It was a fair question, one that seemed increasingly difficult to answer reasonably. I was afraid she might treat us differently if she knew who I really was. Because you're the boss of a big company. Yes, Emma considered this. But Abby doesn't care about stuff like that. She cares about books and stories, and if you're nice, out of the mouths of babes. Michael felt a fresh wave of shame wash over him. You're right, it was wrong of me to lie to her. Is she going to be our friend anymore? The worry in Emma's voice reflected his own deepest fear. I don't know, sweetheart. I hope so. But I hurt her feelings by not telling the truth, and sometimes when people are hurt, they need time. Emma's small face set in determination. You need to say sorry, with flowers, and maybe a cat book. Despite everything, Michael smiled. That's very good advice. Eleanor says flowers fix most problems with ladies. Eleanor is a wise woman, Michael agreed, though he suspected it would take far more than flowers to repair the damage he'd done. By the time they arrived home, the story of Emma's playground adventure and subsequent hospital visit had overshadowed the revelation of Michael's deception. Olivia fussed over her twin, insisting on signing the elastic bandage, even though it wasn't a cast, while Eleanor prepared Emma's favorite chicken soup for dinner. Michael retreated to his studies, staring at his phone. The board meeting he'd abandoned had concluded without him, and his inbox was flooded with urgent messages from Robert and others. But those could wait. There was only one call that mattered now. After 3 attempts that went straight to voicemail, he finally accepted that Abby wasn't ready to talk. Instead, he typed out a text message. Abby, I know any apology isn't enough, but I am truly sorry for deceiving you. There's no excuse for it. What began as a momentary decision that first night became something I couldn't figure out how to undo without losing you. The truth is that I'm not an IT technician. I'm the CEO of Parker Innovations. But the man you've gotten to know these past weeks, the father who loves his daughters, the man who enjoys picnics in the park and conversations about books, that part is real. More real than anything in my life has been for a long time. Please give me a chance to explain in person. The girls miss you, and so do I. He sent the message knowing it was inadequate, but hoping it might be enough to open the door to a conversation. Then he turned his attention to the business matters he'd neglected, working late into the night to catch up, though his thoughts continually drifted to a certain librarian and the simple happiness he feared he'd lost through his own foolishness. Abby read Michael's text message for what felt like the 100th time, sitting cross-legged on her small balcony overlooking the narrow street below. Her apartment above Rossi's bookstore was her sanctuary, a cozy one-bedroom filled with overflowing bookshelves, mismatched furniture, collected over the years, and the comforting scent of old paper and fresh coffee. Parker Innovations. The name had seemed vaguely familiar, so she looked it up online. What she found left her breathless. Michael Parker wasn't just some corporate executive, he was a tech billionaire whose software protected half the financial institutions in the country. His company employed thousands. His innovations had earned him the cover of Forbes magazine. And he had pretended to be an IT technician who struggled to pay for spaghetti dinners. The absurdity of it made her laugh, despite herself. Of all the complications she might have anticipated in dating again, this scenario had never crossed her mind. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Maya entered without waiting for a response, carrying 2 cups of bubble tea from the shop down the street. So, she said without preamble, handing Abby a cup, your mysterious IT guy is actually Michael Parker of Parker Innovations. The Michael Parker. Abby stared at her friend. How did you know? Maya shrugged. You mentioned twins named Emma and Olivia. I got curious and did some digging. His wife's death made the society pages 3 years ago. Cancer, very tragic. He's been Boston's most eligible widower ever since. Why didn't you tell me? Abby asked, feeling a fresh wave of betrayal that even her best friend had kept this from her. I just figured it out today after you called about the school incident, Maya assured her son. And honestly, I thought you knew and just weren't telling me because you didn't want me to make a big deal about it. Abby shook her head. I had no idea. He let me pay for dinner, Maya. He drove a Honda that barely started. Maya mused, sipping her tea. Interesting strategy. Most rich guys flaunt their wealth to impress women. This one hit it. Because he was lying to me. Or, Maya countered, because he wanted you to like him for himself, not his money or status. Abby hadn't considered this perspective. That doesn't excuse the deception. No, it doesn't, Maya agreed. But it might explain it. The question is whether the person you've been falling for is real, even if his job title wasn't. Falling for. The phrase caught Abby off guard, though she couldn't deny its accuracy. Somewhere between library stories and park picnics, between Emma's exuberance and Olivia's quiet wisdom, between conversations that stretched late into the evening, she had indeed begun falling for the single father with the kind eyes and gentle manner. "I don't belong in his world, Maya," she said softly. "Billionaire CEOs don't end up with children's librarians except in Hallmark movies." "Maybe that's exactly why he kept it from you," Maya suggested. "Maybe he's tired of people who do belong in his world. Or maybe this was all some kind of experiment, or a way to seem more relatable for some PR campaign." Even as she voiced these possibilities, Abby knew they rang false. The man she'd come to know over the past weeks, whatever his name or occupation, had shown genuine care for his daughters, genuine interest in her work, genuine warmth in every interaction. Maya stood gathering her purse. You know what they say about the simplest explanation usually being the right one? Maybe he's just a guy who met a girl and panicked about messing it up. She paused at the door. "For what it's worth, in all the years I've known you, I've never seen you light up talking about someone the way you do about him and those little girls." After Maya left, Abby returned to her balcony, watching as the streetlights flickered on one by one. Her phone buzzed with another text, a photo of Emma holding up a homemade get-well card, her bandaged wrist prominently displayed. The message read simply, "She wanted you to know she's okay. No pressure to respond. Just know you're missed." Abby felt tears prick at her eyes. Whatever Michael Parker's reasons for his deception, those two little girls were innocent, and the thought of never seeing them again created an ache she hadn't anticipated. Before she could reconsider, she typed a response. "Tell Emma I'm glad she's okay and to follow doctor's orders. Tell Olivia I found a new book about a brave rabbit she might like." She hesitated, then added, "I need time to think." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. A small opening in a door she had been ready to close completely. Whether she would step through it remained to be seen. Victoria Hartman approached her target with the calculated precision that had defined her rise through corporate America. Seated at a corner table in one of Boston's most exclusive restaurants, she projected an image of dignified authority, her silver-streaked dark hair swept into an elegant chignon, her charcoal suit impeccably tailored. When Abigail Morgan entered the restaurant, looking somewhat bewildered by the opulent surroundings, Victoria allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. The librarian was exactly as her private investigator had described, attractive in a wholesome way, modestly dressed, clearly uncomfortable in this setting. Perfect. "Ms. Morgan," Victoria stood extending her hand. "Thank you for coming. I'm Victoria Hartman, Executive Vice President at Parker Innovations." Abby shook her hand with visible hesitation. "Your assistant said this was about a potential library partnership." "Please sit." Victoria gestured to the chair across from her. "And yes, in a manner of speaking, Parker Innovations is considering a significant charitable initiative focused on childhood literacy." It wasn't entirely a lie. The company did make substantial charitable donations, though none currently directed toward the specific project Victoria was about to propose. "That sounds wonderful." Abby said, her professional interest clearly piqued despite her wariness. "Though I'm not sure why you'd want to meet with me specifically." Victoria smiled. "Your mobile reading program concept has attracted attention in certain circles. Reading Nest, I believe you call it." Abby's surprise was evident. "How do you know about that?" "It's just an idea I've been developing. I haven't even submitted a formal proposal to the library board yet." "Michael mentioned it," Victoria said smoothly, watching Abby's expression carefully. "He finds your passion for literacy charming." The calculated pause had the desired effect. Abby's posture stiffened slightly. "I didn't realize Michael and I were a topic of discussion at Parker Innovations," she said carefully. "Michael Parker's personal life is of great interest to the board, especially with our IPO approaching and the holiday product launch just weeks away." Victoria signaled the waiter for wine. "His choices reflect on the company's stability and future." The implications hung in the air between them as Victoria poured 2 glasses of an expensive Bordeaux. "Which brings me to the purpose of our meeting. The board is prepared to fully fund your Reading Nest program, mobile library, staffing books, outreach, a multi-million-dollar commitment over 5 years." Abby's eyes widened. "That's incredibly generous." "With one condition," Victoria continued, setting down her wine glass. "End your relationship with Michael Parker." The shock on Abby's face quickly transformed to indignation. Excuse me. Ms. Morgan, let me be direct. Michael Parker is the public face of a company valued at over $30 billion. His personal choices are scrutinized by investors, competitors, and the media. Victoria extracted a folder from her briefcase, sliding it across the table. These are articles about Michael's previous relationships since his wife's death. Reluctantly, Abby opened the folder. Victoria had selected the materials, carefully photographs of Michael, with various elegant, sophisticated women at galas, in charity events, tabloid speculation about his romantic life, all presented without context or explanation. Michael's pattern is consistent, Victoria continued. He is drawn to women who represent brief escapes from his real life. Diversions, if you will. But when it comes to serious relationships, he inevitably chooses partners from his social circle, people who understand the demands and scrutiny of his position. Why are you showing me this? Abby asked, closing the folder. Because despite what you may believe, that this isn't the first time Michael has gone incognito to meet women. Victoria delivered the lie with practiced conviction. It's a game for him, a way to feel normal temporarily before returning to his actual life. Abby's expression remained carefully neutral, but Victoria detected the flicker of doubt she'd been hoping to seed. I don't believe you, Abby said finally. You don't have to, Victoria replied smoothly. The board's offer stands regardless. $5 million for your Reading Nest program. Complete creative control. The opportunity to help thousands of children access literature they would otherwise never encounter. She leaned forward. All we ask is that you step away from a relationship that was never destined to last anyway. Abby stood abruptly. I'm not interested in your offer or your opinions about my personal life. Consider carefully. Ms. Morgan, Victoria said, remaining seated. Ask yourself what will do more good in this world, a brief romance that will inevitably end, or a program that could change the lives of countless children for years to come. She placed a business card on the table. The offer stands for 48 hours. After that, the funding will be directed elsewhere. As Abby walked away without taking the card, Victoria sipped her wine unconcerned. She hadn't expected an immediate acceptance, but she had planted the seed of doubt, had framed Michael's deception as part of a pattern rather than an isolated mistake. And she had presented a choice that would torment someone as altruistic as Abigail Morgan, personal happiness versus the greater good. Victoria had not risen to her position by underestimating people's capacity for self-sacrifice in the name of noble causes. She was counting on Abby's idealism to do what threats and money alone could not. When Michael returned home that evening, Eleanor met him at the door with an expression that immediately sent a chill through him. What's happened? Are the girls all right? The girls are fine, Mr. Parker, Eleanor assured him. But this arrived for you an hour ago. She handed him a simple white envelope with his name written in a now familiar handwriting. Michael felt his stomach drop as he took it. She seemed very upset when she dropped it off, Eleanor added gently. Wouldn't come inside, wouldn't wait to see the girls. Michael nodded, retreating to his study before opening the envelope with trembling fingers. The letter inside was brief, the handwriting less steady than the address on the envelope. Michael, I've given this a great deal of thought. The truth is that we come from different worlds, and I don't believe I can be part of yours. The scrutiny, the expectations, the lifestyle, none of it is what I want or who I am. I care about you and the girls more than I expected to, which is why this is so difficult. But continuing would only lead to more pain when the inevitable happens. People like you and people like me don't end up together outside of storybooks. Please tell Emma and Olivia that I'll miss our library visits and our stories. They are extraordinary children who deserve every happiness, as do you. Goodbye, Abby. Michael read the letter 3 times, each reading more painful than the last. The words felt rehearsed somehow, as if Abby were trying to convince herself as much as him. And something about the timing so soon after his text about Emma, which she had responded to with what seemed like an opening, felt wrong. He was reaching for his phone to call her when it rang in his hand. Robert's name flashed on the screen. Not now, Robert, he answered wearily. Victoria's calling an emergency board meeting tomorrow morning, Robert said without preamble. She's making her move, Michael. She's going to call for a vote of no confidence. Let her, Michael said, staring at Abby's letter. Maybe she's right. Maybe the company needs someone whose priorities are clearer than mine seem to be. What are you talking about? Robert sounded genuinely alarmed. This company is everything you and Jennifer built. Your legacy, your daughter's inheritance. The mention of his daughters gave Michael pause. They deserved the future he and Jennifer had dreamed of building for them. But what good was securing their financial legacy if he failed to show them how to live with integrity and purpose? "I'll be there," Michael promised. "But Robert, when this is over, we need to talk about the future, about what Parker Innovations is becoming and whether it's still the company Jennifer and I intended to build." After hanging up, Michael returned to Abby's letter, reading it once more. Something still didn't sit right. The Abby he had come to know would have delivered such news in person, would have wanted to say goodbye to the girls properly. Unless something or someone had convinced her that a clean break was necessary. Michael folded the letter carefully, placing it in his desk drawer. Tomorrow he would face Victoria, and the board would fight for the company he had built from nothing. But after that, he had another battle ahead, one for something far more precious than stock options or corporate control. A battle for a second chance at the kind of happiness no amount of success could provide. The boardroom of Parker Innovations occupied the entire 42nd floor of their downtown Boston headquarters, floor-to-ceiling windows, offering panoramic views of the city Michael Parker had called home his entire life. On clear days like this one, you could see all the way to the harbor, where ships moved slowly across the water, like toys in a child's bath. Michael stood at these windows now, watching the morning sun glint off distant waves, gathering his thoughts before the meeting that would determine not just his professional future, but in many ways the direction of his life. Behind him, the enormous mahogany table stood empty, awaiting the arrival of board members who would soon sit in judgment of the man who had built this company from nothing. The door opened and Robert entered, his weathered face more lined with concern than Michael had ever seen it. "They're on their way up," he said, straightening his tie nervously. "Victoria has been meeting with them individually all week. She's prepared, Michael." Michael nodded, turning from the window. "So am I." Robert studied him, noting the calm determination in his former protege's eyes. "What exactly are you planning?" Before Michael could answer, the board members began filing in 10 men and women in expensive suits, their expressions carefully neutral, as they nodded greetings and took their seats. Victoria entered last, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that matched her calculating eyes, a thin smile playing at her lips as she settled at the far end of the table, directly opposite Michael's chair. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," she began once everyone was seated. "As you know, I've called this emergency meeting to address concerns about the company's leadership in advance of our Thanksgiving product launch and upcoming IPO." Michael remained standing, watching as Victoria distributed folders to each board member. Her efficiency was admirable, even when directed against him. "Inside these packets, you'll find documentation of what I believe constitutes a pattern of concerning behavior by our CEO," Victoria continued. "Missed meetings, delayed decisions, and most significantly, a failure to address the board's explicit request regarding his public image." She turned to Michael, her expression a masterclass in feigned regret. "Michael, we've all valued your vision and leadership over the years. But with the company on the cusp of its most significant transition since founding, stability is paramount. The board deserves a leader fully committed to Parker Innovations' success, not one distracted by personal matters." A murmur ran through the room as board members flipped through their packets. Michael knew what they contained: carefully selected emails, meeting minutes, and probably surveillance photos of his outings with Abby and the twins, all presented without context to suggest a CEO losing his grip. "I move for a vote of no confidence," Victoria stated formally, "and I propose myself as interim CEO until a permanent replacement can be selected after the IPO." The boldness of her place silenced the room. Even those board members who had been leaning toward her position seemed taken aback by her directness. Michael finally spoke, his voice quiet but carrying clearly in the hushed room. "Before we proceed with Victoria's proposed vote, I'd like to make a brief presentation of my own." Without waiting for permission, he activated the room's projection system. The screens around the boardroom lit up with images that caused several board members to straighten in their seats. "These are from last night," Michael explained, advancing through photographs of Victoria meeting with Abby at Le Bernardin. Victoria invited Abigail Morgan, a children's librarian at the Boston Public Library, to discuss what she called a potential partnership for literacy programs. Victoria's expression remained impassive, though her knuckles whitened around her pen. What Victoria actually offered Ms. Morgan was $5 million to end her personal relationship with me. Michael continued, his tone matter-of-fact rather than accusatory. "Funds that have not been approved by this board for a program that does not yet exist in our charitable giving portfolio." Several board members turned to look at Victoria, whose composure finally cracked. This is absurd. I was simply exploring potential community initiatives. By coincidence, immediately after this meeting, Ms. Morgan delivered a letter ending our relationship. Michael interrupted, advancing to the next slide, security footage from his home showing Abby delivering the envelope to Eleanor. A relationship that I should note the board has no authority to regulate under any interpretation of our corporate bylaws. The atmosphere in the room had shifted perceptibly, discomfort replacing the earlier tension. Michael wasn't finished. More concerning than this intrusion into my personal life is what it represents about our corporate culture and the direction of this company. He set down the presentation remote, placing both hands on the table as he looked at each board member in turn. Parker Innovations was founded on a simple principle: technology should bring people together, not isolate them. It should enhance lives, not complicate them. He straightened, buttoning his jacket in a gesture that reminded several board members of the young, passionate entrepreneur who had first convinced them to invest in his vision. Somewhere along the way, we've lost sight of that mission. We've become so focused on quarterly results and market share that we've forgotten why we started this journey in the first place. His gaze settled on Victoria. We've begun to value control over connection, power over purpose. This is all very philosophical, Michael, Victoria interjected smoothly, but it doesn't address the board's concerns about your commitment. I'm fully committed to this company. Michael cut her off, his voice gaining strength. But I'm equally committed to building a legacy my late wife would be proud of and that my daughters can someday inherit without shame. He activated the presentation again, this time displaying mock-ups of a fleet of mobile libraries emblazoned with the Parker Innovations logo, each vehicle equipped with digital learning stations and bookshelves. This is Reading Nest, a mobile literacy program targeting underserved communities across New England. The concept was developed by Abigail Morgan based on her experience bringing books to children who might otherwise never discover the joy of reading. The board members leaned forward, examining the images with genuine interest. I'm proposing we launch this initiative at the Thanksgiving event alongside our new product line, not as a charitable afterthought, but as a core component of our corporate identity moving forward. Victoria scoffed. You want to dilute our technology announcement with a book donation program? I want to demonstrate that Parker Innovations understands technology as a means to an end, not the end itself, Michael countered. That we recognize our responsibility to ensure the next generation has the tools to think critically in the digital world we're helping to create. He activated a final slide displaying projected media coverage and stakeholder response analyses. Our marketing team believes this initiative could generate more positive attention than any product launch in our history. It positions us not just as another tech company, but as a thought leader in education and digital literacy. The board chairman, James Whitman, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke. This is an interesting proposal, Michael, but it doesn't address Victoria's concerns about your personal conduct. Michael nodded, having anticipated this. You're right, James, so let me address them directly. He turned off the presentation and faced the board with renewed intensity. Yes, I've been spending more time with my daughters since Jennifer died. Yes, I've begun dating again. And yes, I made the mistake of concealing my identity from someone I was growing to care about out of fear that my position would once again come between me and genuine human connection. The raw honesty in his voice silenced even his strongest critics on the board. What Victoria presents as distraction, I see as finally achieving the balance Jennifer always wanted for us. She didn't build this company with me so I could become a stranger to my children or measure my worth by stock prices. He took a deep breath, reaching the moment of truth. If the board believes that commitment to family and personal integrity is incompatible with leading Parker Innovations, then I will respect that decision. But I will not apologize for becoming the kind of man my daughters can look up to, regardless of my job title. The silence that followed was profound. Then James Whitman cleared his throat. I believe we've heard enough to reconsider the necessity of Victoria's proposed vote. He looked around the table. Unless there are objections, I suggest we table this discussion and move directly to consideration of Michael's Reading Nest proposal. Victoria began to protest, but the mood of the room had shifted decisively. Several board members were already asking questions about implementation timelines and community impact metrics for the literacy program, their earlier concerns forgotten in the face of a compelling new direction. As the discussion continued without her, Victoria gathered her papers and quietly exited the boardroom, her carefully constructed power play dismantled by the one thing she had never truly understood about Michael Parker. His success had always been rooted not in ambition, but in purpose. Abby Morgan sat cross-legged on the worn carpet of the community center's small library, surrounded by a circle of eager faces. The children from the Brighton Park shelter had been coming to her Saturday morning reading sessions for nearly a month now, their initial shyness gradually giving way to enthusiastic participation. And the brave rabbit realized, Abby read, using the special voice she reserved for story climaxes, that being afraid didn't mean she wasn't courageous. It meant that courage was choosing to act even when fear made you want to hide. Like when I had to go to a new school, piped up Darnell, a serious 8-year-old who rarely spoke during group activities. Abby smiled at him warmly. Exactly like that. It takes real courage to go somewhere new where you don't know anyone yet. Did you ever have to be brave like the rabbit, Miss Abby? Asked Lily, the youngest of the group at just 5. The innocent question struck closer to home than the child could know. Since delivering her letter to Michael's house 3 days ago, Abby had been cycling through waves of doubt, anger, and regret. Had ending things been the right decision? Was she being courageous by walking away from a situation that frightened her? Or was she simply hiding like the rabbit before her transformation? I try to be brave, she answered honestly. Sometimes I succeed and sometimes I have to try again tomorrow. As the session ended and the children dispersed to the craft table where Maya was helping them create their own storybooks, Abby began gathering the scattered pillows and books. The community center's small library was nothing compared to her workplace at the Boston Public Library, but there was something deeply satisfying about bringing books directly to children who might otherwise never discover them. This was the essence of her Reading Nest Dream Meeting Children, where they were creating safe spaces for imagination and learning in communities often overlooked by traditional educational institutions. You're good with them, observed Samuel Johnson, the community center's elderly director, approaching with a cup of coffee for her. They look forward to Saturdays now. They're amazing kids, Abby replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. So resilient, so eager to learn, despite everything many of them have been through. Samuel nodded, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners. Reminds me of another young person I knew about 30 years ago, a girl who found her escape in books when the world around her was falling apart. Abby smiled, recognizing herself in his gentle reminiscence. She had been volunteering at Samuel's centers since college, finding in his quiet wisdom a guide when her own path seemed uncertain. Any word from your CEO friend? Samuel asked, never one to dance around difficult topics. Abby sighed. No, and I'm not expecting any. I made my position pretty clear in that letter. Samuel mused, settling his lanky frame into a nearby chair. Funny thing about clear positions. Sometimes they're like those reading glasses. I'm always losing clear to everyone except the person who needs them most. Samuel, Abby groaned, please don't turn this into one of your life lessons. Too late, the older man chuckled. You know, when my Evelyn and I first met, I was intimidated as hell. College professor with a PhD, while I was just a community organizer with a high school diploma. Convinced myself it could never work, that our worlds were too different. This isn't the same situation, Abby protested. Isn't it? You're both afraid of the same thing, that the differences in your circumstances matter more than the connection you've found. Samuel's voice gentled. 42 years of marriage later, I can tell you that fear of rejection is a poor foundation for life decisions. Before Abby could respond, Maya appeared beside them, her expression uncharacteristically serious. Abby, you need to see this. She held out her phone, displaying a breaking news story from the Boston Globe. The headline made Abby's heart skip. Parker Innovation CEO announces major literacy initiative ahead of product launch. Beneath the headline was a photo of Michael at what appeared to be a press conference, standing before a mock-up of a colorful bus emblazoned with the words Reading Nest and stylized images of children with books. That's my program, Abby whispered, quickly scanning the article. The mobile libraries, the community outreach model, the digital learning stations, it's exactly what I've been developing. Read the quote, Maya urged, pointing halfway down the article. Michael's words leapt from the screen. This initiative was conceived by Abigail Morgan, whose vision for bringing literature to underserved communities represents the kind of innovative thinking our company was founded to support. Ms. Morgan's insight that technology should enhance, rather than replace traditional literacy, has reshaped our approach to corporate social responsibility. Abby looked up from the phone stunned. He credited me, by name, and committed $20 million to launching the program across New England, Maya added. That's a lot more than Victoria offered you to disappear. Samuel, who had been listening quietly, raised an eyebrow. Someone offered you money to end your relationship. It's complicated. Abby sighed, still trying to process this unexpected development. Actually, Maya countered, it sounds pretty simple. Man meets woman. Man lies about identity. Woman discovers truth and feels betrayed. Evil corporate villain tries to separate them with bribery. Man publicly acknowledges woman's brilliance and dedicates millions to her dream project. She grinned. It's practically a lifetime movie. Despite everything, Abby found herself laughing. When you put it that way, the question, Samuel said gently, is what happens in the next scene. Before Abby could answer, her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from an unknown number, but the content made the sender unmistakable. The twins have their fall recital at Oakwood Academy tonight at 7. They've been practicing a special dance to a whole new world for weeks. Olivia has overcome her stage fright enough to take a small solo. Emma's wrist is healing well, though the doctor has forbidden any cartwheels during the performance, a restriction she's finding particularly unfair. They'd be overjoyed if a certain librarian happened to attend. No pressure or expectations, just 3 people who miss you very much. The message was followed by an address and then a simple closing. Whatever you decide, thank you for touching our lives. We're better for having known you, however briefly. Abby stared at the message, feeling the careful wall she'd built around her heart begin to crumble. Maya, reading over her shoulder, simply said, I'll drive you. The Oakwood Academy auditorium buzzed with a particular energy unique to children's performances. Proud parents clutching bouquets and cameras, younger siblings squirming in their seats, teachers making last-minute adjustments to costumes and props backstage. Michael sat in the third row, program in hand, an empty seat beside him that Eleanor had insisted on saving just in case. The elderly housekeeper's optimism seemed misplaced. Michael had sent his message hours ago with no response. After the board meeting and press conference announcing Reading Nest, he had considered going directly to the community center, where he knew Abby volunteered on Saturdays. But Robert had counseled patience. Give her space to come to her own conclusion, his old friend had advised. You've made your position clear. The rest is up to her. So instead, he sat alone in a school auditorium, waiting for his daughters to perform, trying not to check the empty seat or the entrance doors every 30 seconds. The lights dimmed and a middle-aged woman in a flowing dress approached the microphone. Welcome, parents and friends, to Oakwood Academy's Fall Showcase. We're so pleased you could join us for this celebration of music, dance, and expression. As the first group of children took the stage, kindergartners performing a somewhat chaotic rendition of You've Got a Friend in Me, Michael found his thoughts drifting to the board meeting earlier that day. Victoria's absence from the building afterwards suggested she recognized her defeat, at least temporarily. The board had unanimously approved the Reading Nest initiative, many expressing genuine enthusiasm for the direction it represented. It should have felt like a victory, yet without Abby to share it with, the triumph seemed hollow. A light touch on his shoulder startled him from his thoughts. He turned to find Abby sliding into the empty seat beside him, her cheeks flushed as though she had been running. I'm sorry I'm late, she whispered. Parking was impossible. Michael stared at her, momentarily speechless, afraid that speaking might somehow break the spell of her presence. I got your text, she explained unnecessarily, her hands fidgeting with the program Eleanor must have given her. I couldn't miss Olivia's big solo debut. I'm glad you came. Michael finally managed, his voice husky with emotion. The girls will be ecstatic. Abby nodded, her eyes fixed on the stage where another group was performing. I saw the news about Reading Nest. Abby, she shook her head slightly, cutting him off. Not here, we can talk after the show. They sat in silence, then watching as group after group performed. Despite the tension between them, Michael found himself acutely aware of every small movement Abby made, the way she leaned forward during particularly sweet performances, her quiet laugh at the inevitable mishaps, the soft awe when a particularly young child froze momentarily before being coaxed back into action by a teacher. Finally, the announcer called, and now Ms. Peterson's first grade class will perform A Whole New World from Aladdin. Michael sat straighter as his daughter's class filed onto the stage. The girls were dressed in varying shades of blue and purple, with glitter liberally applied to their costumes and faces. Emma was easy to spot, her bandaged wrist now decorated with colorful markers, her expression one of fierce concentration. Olivia stood slightly behind the others, her posture rigid with the nerves, her eyes scanning the audience. The moment Olivia spotted Abby, her entire demeanor changed. Her small face lit up with such joy that Michael heard Abby's breath catch beside him. The music began and the children started their carefully choreographed movements, though Emma added flourishes that were definitely not part of the original routine. When Olivia's solo moment came, just 8 measures where she stepped forward to mimic Jasmine's discovery of a whole new world, her voice was tiny but clear, her movements precise despite her obvious nervousness. Michael felt his throat tighten with pride, and beside him, Abby discreetly wiped at her eyes. At the final note, the audience erupted in applause. Michael and Abby both stood clapping, perhaps more enthusiastically than the performance strictly warranted, but unable to contain their shared pride. As the children filed off stage, Emma caught sight of Abby and nearly broke formation to run to her, stopped only by a teacher's gentle hand on her shoulder. Her exaggerated wave with her good arm made several parents chuckle. "They really do light up when they see you," Michael said softly. Abby nodded, not trusting herself to speak. After the final performance and closing remarks, parents began making their way backstage to collect their children. Michael and Abby moved with the crowd, maintaining their unspoken agreement to postpone any serious conversation until after reuniting with the twins. They found Emma and Olivia in their classroom, surrounded by glitter-shedding classmates and exhausted-looking teachers. The moment the girls spotted Abby, they broke free from the group and ran toward her, nearly knocking her over with the force of their hugs. You came," Emma chanted, her arms wrapped around Abby's waist. "Did you see my solo?" Olivia asked, her earlier confidence now tempered by uncertainty. "I didn't forget any words." "You were both absolutely amazing," Abby assured them, kneeling to their level despite her nice clothes. "I wouldn't have missed it for anything." "Are you still mad at Daddy?" Emma asked bluntly, causing Michael to wince. Abby met his gaze over the girls' heads, her expression softening. "Your dad and I have some grown-up things to talk about, but I'm not mad." "Can you come home with us?" Olivia asked hopefully. "Eleanor made your favorite cookies, the lemon ones." "How does Eleanor know my favorite cookies?" Abby asked, genuinely puzzled. "Daddy told her," Emma supplied helpfully. "He tells her everything about you, like how you scrunch your nose when you read, and how you always give the last breadstick to someone else, and how your laugh makes his heart do funny things." Michael felt heat rise to his face. "Emma, remember our talk about private conversations?" "But it's true," Emma insisted. "You said Abby makes you feel like the man you want to be instead of just the man you're supposed to be." The guileless repetition of his private thoughts left Michael momentarily speechless. Abby looked equally stunned, her eyes searching his face as though seeing him clearly for the first time. "I think," she said slowly, "that I would love to come over for cookies, if that's all right with your dad." "More than all right," Michael managed, relief washing over him. As they gathered the girls' things and made their way to the parking lot, Michael realized that whatever conversation awaited them, they had already taken the first step toward reconciliation. Not through grand gestures or explanations, but through the simple act of showing up for 2 little girls who had carved out space in both their hearts. The kitchen of Michael's Beacon Hill home was nothing like Abby had imagined during the weeks they'd been seeing each other. Rather than the sleek, sterile environment one might expect in a tech billionaire's residence, it was warm and lived in, with children's artwork magnetized to the refrigerator, a well-used cookbook stand on the counter, and mismatched mugs hanging from hooks beneath the cabinets. Eleanor, a silver-haired woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, had greeted Abby as though her arrival was both expected and completely ordinary. After serving cookies and milk to the twins, she had tactfully suggested they might enjoy their treats in the playroom, giving the adults privacy to talk. Now Abby sat at the kitchen island, a mug of tea warming her hands, watching as Michael prepared a cup for himself, with the careful attention he seemed to bring to all tasks. "Your home is beautiful," she offered, breaking the silence. "Not what I expected." Michael smiled faintly. "What did you expect? Stark minimalism and lots of glass?" "Something like that," Abby admitted. "Not this warmth." "Jennifer designed most of it," Michael said, bringing his tea to the island and sitting across from her. "She had a theory that a house should feel like it's hugging you when you walk in the door." His eyes grew distant for a moment. "The only room I've changed since she died is my study. Couldn't bear to see her desk empty every day." The simple honesty in his voice reminded Abby of why she had been drawn to him from the beginning, not the persona of David Williams, but the fundamental decency of the man beneath any name or title. "I saw the press conference," she said, steering toward the conversation they needed to have. Reading Nest is exactly how I imagined it. Michael nodded. Because it's your vision, not mine. I just provided the platform and resources to make it happen. He hesitated. I hope you don't mind. I should have asked your permission before using the name or concept. Mind? Abby shook her head in disbelief. Michael, you have committed $20 million to a program I sketched on napkins. It's beyond anything I could have accomplished on my own. That's not true, Michael countered. You would have found a way. Determination like yours always does. A comfortable silence fell between them, the kind that had characterized their best moments together. No need to fill the air with unnecessary words. Why did you do it? Abby finally asked. Not just the program, but giving me credit publicly, after I ended things. After that letter. Michael considered his answer carefully. Because it was right. Because your ideas deserve recognition. And because I hoped it might show you that I'm not the man Victoria described to you at that restaurant. Abby's eyes widened. You know about that security footage, Michael explained with a small shrug. She wasn't as discreet as she thought. That's a little unsettling, Abby remarked, though she couldn't muster any real indignation. Does everyone at your level live under that kind of surveillance? Unfortunately, yes. It's part of what I was trying to escape by becoming David Williams. Michael's expression turned serious. I owe you an apology, Abby, not just for the deception, but for putting you in Victoria's crosshairs. She saw you as a threat to her ambitions, and I didn't protect you from that. I don't need protection, Abby said, a hint of her usual spirit returning. And for the record, I didn't believe most of what she told me. It was the realization of just how different our worlds are that scared me. Different how, Michael pressed gently. Because I have money, or because you were afraid of what people would think. Both. Neither. Abby sighed, struggling to articulate feelings she'd barely sorted through herself. When I realized who you really were, suddenly every interaction we'd had seemed, I don't know, suspect somehow. Like maybe you were slumming it playing a game. It was never a game, Michael said softly. That first night was an impulse, yes. But everything after every conversation, every moment with you and the girls, that was the most real thing in my life. Abby studied his face, finding only sincerity in his expression. Why me? You could date anyone, models, executives, people from your world. That's exactly why, Sentinel, Michael said simply. I've tried dating appropriate women since Jennifer died. Women who understood the business, who moved in the same circles. And every single time I felt like I was being assessed for my potential as a strategic alliance, not seen as a person. He leaned forward, his gaze intent. You looked at me at David and saw a father trying at his best, a man with flaws and fears and hopes. Not a balance sheet or a business opportunity. Because that's who you are, Abby said softly. The CEO part is what you do, not who you are. Exactly. Michael's smile was tinged with wonder, as though she'd articulated something he'd long felt but never quite expressed. And the truth is, I'm tired of being Michael Parker, CEO, to everyone in my life. I want to be the man my daughters see, the man you saw before you knew about Parker Innovations. Abby felt the last of her reservations beginning to dissolve. So where does that leave us? Wherever you want it to, Michael replied. I'm not asking for forgiveness or a relationship you're not ready for. Just a chance to start over. Honestly this time. From the doorway came a small voice. Does this mean Abby isn't going away again? They turned to find Olivia standing there in her pajamas, clutching her rabbit-stuffed animal, her expression painfully hopeful. Oh, sweetheart, Abby said, opening her arms. Olivia immediately ran to her, climbing into her lap with the unself-conscious trust of childhood. I can't promise I'll never go away, but I can promise that if I do, I'll always say a proper goodbye. But you're staying tonight, Olivia pressed. Abby glanced at Michael, who gave a tiny nod. Yes, I'm staying tonight. We can have breakfast together in the morning. This seemed to satisfy Olivia, who snuggled closer. Good, because Emma said if you didn't come back, we'd have to kidnap you from the library, but I told her that's against the rules. Michael choked back a laugh. Very against the rules. Thank you for being the voice of reason, Liv. You're welcome, Olivia said seriously. Can you read me a story Abby Daddy does the voices wrong for Princess Periwinkle? I'd be honored, Abby replied, standing with Olivia still in her arms, the child's weight familiar and comforting. As they started toward the stairs, Michael called softly, Abby. She turned back, Olivia's head now resting on her shoulder, little fingers playing with her hair. Thank you, he said simply, for giving us a second chance. Abby smiled, realizing that despite the complications, despite the vast differences in their circumstances, This felt right in a way nothing else in her life ever had. I think we're giving each other a second chance, she corrected gently. And maybe that's exactly what we all needed. The Reading Nest initiative launched on Thanksgiving Day with a fleet of 10 converted buses, each painted in vibrant colors and equipped with both traditional books and digital learning stations. The first deployment targeted neighborhoods across Boston with limited access to libraries or bookstores, offering not just books to borrow, but comfortable reading spaces, storytelling sessions, and literacy workshops for parents. Abby took a leave of absence from the Boston Public Library to oversee the program's implementation, bringing her expertise in childhood literacy and her passion for reaching underserved communities. The media coverage was overwhelmingly positive, with several major publications highlighting the innovative partnership between one of tech's biggest companies and a children's librarian with a vision. Michael attended the launch event, not as the CEO making a charitable donation, but as Abby's supportive partner, standing back while she cut the ribbon on the first bus and explained the program to gathered reporters. The twins were there too, proudly showing visitors their favorite reading nooks on the prototype bus, Emma's energy, balanced by Olivia's quiet attention to detail. As winter settled over Boston, Michael and Abby found their rhythms, separate lives connected by deep understanding and growing love. Abby kept her apartment above the bookstore, needing her own space and independence. Michael respected this boundary, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. The girls divided their time between both homes, bringing light and laughter to Abby's small rooms, just as they did to Michael's larger ones. They added their drawings to her refrigerator, their books to her shelves, their presents to her once solitary life. Victoria Hartman resigned from Parker Innovations in January, accepting a position with a rival firm. Her departure was announced with professional courtesy, her contributions acknowledged without rancor. Michael understood ambition too well to resent hers, though he remained vigilant against the corporate culture she had represented. Under Robert's guidance, the company realigned its mission statement and corporate values, emphasizing balance and ethical innovation over growth at any cost. The IPO proceeded smoothly, though, with a slightly different emphasis than originally planned, positioning Parker Innovations as a technology company with a human-centered approach to both products and corporate responsibility. Through it all, Michael and Abby's relationship deepened, slowly building on honesty rather than grand gestures. They shared quiet evenings after the twins were asleep, talking about books and dreams and fears. They navigated the occasional tabloid speculation with good humor, Abby growing more comfortable with the public scrutiny that came with being in Michael's orbit. When spring arrived, Michael invited Abby and the twins for a picnic in the Boston Common, where they had spent so many pleasant afternoons during their early dating days. Eleanor packed a feast in an old-fashioned wicker basket, complete with checkered cloth and homemade lemonade. The day was perfect sunshine, warming the new grass cherry trees in full bloom, the girls racing ahead to claim their favorite spot near the duck pond. Michael carried the heavy basket while Abby brought a stack of books, their hands occasionally brushing as they walked comfortable in their shared silence. They set up their picnic beneath a spreading oak tree, its new leaves creating dappled shade on the blanket below. The girls immediately began a complex game involving the ducks and an imaginary kingdom, leaving the adults to arrange the food and watch their antics. "Do you remember our first picnic here?" Michael asked, handing Abby a glass of lemonade. "Of course," she smiled. "Emma spilled juice all over your shirt, and you were so worried about looking presentable for your non-existent IT job." Michael laughed. "I was more worried you'd realize I had no idea how normal people pack picnics. Eleanor had to give me a crash course in sandwich making." "You've improved considerably," Abby teased, taking a bite of a perfectly assembled turkey and avocado sandwich. They ate in companionable silence, watching the twins play. Michael seemed unusually quiet, his expression thoughtful as he gazed across the park. "Penny for your thoughts," Abby prompted. "I was just thinking about how different my life is now compared to a year ago," he replied. "Last spring I was drowning in work, barely seeing the girls, letting the board dictate even my personal choices." He turned to her, his eyes warm. "And then you sat down at the wrong table in that Italian restaurant." "Best mistake I ever made," Abby said softly. "For me too." Michael reached into the picnic basket, extracting a small flat package wrapped in simple brown paper. "I have something for you." Abby accepted the gift with raised eyebrows. "What's the occasion?" "Just open it," he encouraged. She carefully unwrapped the paper to reveal an antique book, a first edition of The Secret Garden, in remarkably good condition. Abby gasped, running her fingers reverently over the embossed cover. Michael, how did you find this? I have my resources, he said with a smile. Open it. Inside the front cover was a handwritten inscription. To Abby, who showed me that the most beautiful gardens are the ones we discover by accident, tend with patience, and share with love. Always, reached Michael. As she looked up from the inscription, her eyes bright with emotion, she found Michael had moved to one knee beside her on the blanket. In his palm rested not a velvet jewelry box as she might have expected, but a small handcrafted ring made of colorful beads and twisted wire. The girls made this, he explained, his voice husky with emotion. They wanted you to have something special, something that came from their hearts, not from a store. Abby felt tears welling in her eyes as she looked at the uneven, heartfelt creation. I'm not asking for a headline or a grand ceremony, Michael said softly. Just this. Be you with us with them. Be the heart of this home we're building together. He took a deep breath. Abigail Morgan, will you marry me? Abby looked past him to where Emma and Olivia now stood watching, their faces alight with hope and anticipation. Then back to Michael, whose eyes held the same vulnerable openness she had first glimpsed that night at table 9. She smiled through her tears, slipping the handmade ring onto her finger alongside the priceless first edition, in her lap symbols of the different worlds they had managed to bridge together. We've been a family for a while now, she said softly. You're just catching up. The girls squealed in delight, rushing to surround them with hugs and excited chatter about being flower girls and whether they could have a book-themed wedding cake. Michael pulled Abby close, kissing her amidst the joyful chaos, his heart finally at peace. That evening, as the golden light of sunset bathed the city in its warm glow, they sat together on the porch swing of the cottage Michael had purchased in the suburbs, a compromise between his grand home and her cozy apartment. The girls had fallen asleep exhausted from the excitement of the day and secure in the knowledge that their family was now complete. You were never just the billionaire CEO to me, Abby said, her head resting against his shoulder, even after I knew. You were always the dad with kind eyes and spaghetti on his shirt. Michael smiled, his arm tightening around her. And you were never the wrong woman, just the right one at a table no one expected. In the gentle quiet of that ordinary spring evening, they began the rest of their lives together. Not with headlines or fanfare, but with the simple certainty that sometimes love doesn't arrive with perfect timing or unexpected packages. Sometimes it sits down at the wrong table, pays for dinner when you can't, and turns your whole world right. Sometimes home isn't a place at all, but the people who see you clearly love you completely and choose you every day, not despite your flaws and fears, but because of the courage it takes to overcome them. For Michael and Abby, that journey had begun at table 9. And though the path had been winding with its share of mistakes and misunderstandings, it had led them exactly where they were meant to be, together with two little girls building a life based not on expectations or appearances, but on the authentic connection they had found that first night when a simple act of kindness opened the door to a second chance at love.